Due to some spotty internet connection, there were some minor difficulties with recording this episode. Please forgive breaks in the audio during this workshop session.
I appreciate having you all here today. This is the second time we will be doing this kind of panel of Sparkboxers where we chat about interviews and whiteboarding. So this is great to have. I know we have a ton of different experience on the panel and people working in different places and applying for different kinds of jobs and having, varied success or not having success. And I think all of that is valuable to share. So I'm really excited to have everyone here today and to talk about this. So the format for today, if I can, no, my keyboard's not working. Okay. So I'll be the moderator for today with this panel, and I'll be asking some questions, but apprentices, please feel free if you have questions, go for it, ask them. I'll start us off with a question or two just to get the ball rolling, and then you can ask any questions you have, or I'm sure questions will come up as people say things. And so everybody's like sitting at this table, and in a panel, as a moderator, I would ask a question, and anybody on the panel, and however many people want to, could answer the question. So it doesn't have to be just one answer, but that's kind of the layout. It says my internet's unstable, so I'm sorry if you missed some of that, but just imagine there's a panel before you and I'm the moderator. So the first question, what has been the format of some whiteboarding or development interviews you've done in the past? And anyone can speak to this.
But Sparkbox, I know, has a take-home developer interview that I found really encouraging because I could really think through all my implementations without being on the spot. But the part that was kind of on the spot was phase 2 of the interview, that talking through the decisions of that you've made. So the project was why did you organize things the way you did? And then the thing outside of Sparkbox, the only true whiteboarding that I have experience with was actually was a flag that was like they called as a first interview, and then no indication there'd be any whiteboarding, and said, go to this website, this URL, and I'll watch you answer these questions. And as best as you can be prepared for those, but that kind of was the first time I felt caught off guard. And that kind of was like a flag that I felt this a little bit like wasn't expected. Like they didn't, this was they told me it was a get to know you interview, which I was surprised by their approach.
And what kind of questions did you have to answer? I'm just curious.
In that interview, it was very much a whiteboard in the sense that like this is like given an object or an array, turn it into an object, turn it into an array, or vice versa. I don't recall. And I think it was kind of like a code pen where you can select the language and it would run based on that. And I got through one pretty relatively easy. And for me, I vocalized what my thought process is more than just getting through it. So the second one, I paused and said, I talked through my thought process. Oh, it's failing here. So the second actual, second or third question, I didn't get through, but I vocalized what my thought processes were, which I think was helpful.
Yeah, so I know there are companies, so we do like the take home, right? Like here, here's a problem. kind of solve this and submit your answer. Other companies often have that. Some places don't want to give you like, hey, here's a, thing's going to take you 8 hours. Can we do a 45-minute like kind of whiteboarding session online, kind of in lieu of that? I would say personally, for me, given the choice between the two, I would do the take home. In-person ones can be a little stressful, and it makes it harder to think, and I think kind of really show what you know. Like hey, let's just do it in person, get it over with. May just be what you have to do for schedule wise, but like those tend to be maybe like they expect less of you in those times, but the stress level is way higher.
Yeah, my first interview outside of Sparkbox, so my first job was a take home. And it was nice on a couple of levels. First, because I do also much prefer the take home format. Public coding is just terrifying, especially when you don't know the person that you're interacting with. But the other aspect of it was that opportunity to sit down with them and go over my code as part of the interview process as well. In my situation, they brought in another team member to go over it with me, and on the team. And that was nice for me because then I could get a little bit of a sense of what the team was like. Because that's the other part of job interviews is, yeah, they're interviewing you to see if they want you, but you've got to interview them to see if you want to be part of their team. Yeah, so it was nice to be able to sit down with another team member and go over it, and be able to do some things like maybe challenge them a little bit on some of their viewpoints and see how they react to that. That was one of the things that was really important to me. So.
Said about you interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. I had 3 interviews during the time I was looking for a job before coming to Sparkbox, and they were 3 very different interviews, and based on those interview types, I knew which companies I was interested in and which I was not. So one of the things that always makes me nervous is not really knowing like what kind of format you're going into. And some places will tell you, and some places won't. But I had an idea that one of the companies I was going to be interviewing with was going to be doing like a very technical, like question-based questions about React. So the night before, I'm preparing and I get on Google and I look up literally like good React interview questions. So I have like some sort of like review or study sheet. And I get on the interview the next morning. The interviewer got on, it was a remote interview, and was like, let's see. And I could tell he was typing something, and he starts asking me questions. And he was literally looking at the exact same website that I had looked at the night before. And that was very disappointing to me because it was obvious that he had like not prepared at all for the interview. I had prepared for him, but he hadn't prepared for me. And so it didn't feel like the type of company that I wanted to work for. They didn't seem like they were necessarily their potential candidates. Whereas when I did the Sparkbox interview, it was totally different. And it was kind of strange at first. So I sat down I'd already done the take-home test, and I sat down with the development team. And the first question I get asked is, if you were a superhero, what kind of power would you have? And what animal gave you that power? And I'm like, what is this? But it was great because it was a good icebreaker. It made me laugh. Everyone else was laughing. And the more I get into the interview, I realized that these questions, as silly as they may have sounded at first, were really well thought out and really did a good job of finding out like who I was as a person and what kind of things I valued in a company and in coworkers. And so I knew this was the type of company I wanted to work for because they had put effort into the interview in advance as much as I had. So we were really interested in each other. So I think that's a really important thing to think about whenever you're in the interview, is getting a feel for the type of company that they are and whether you want to work for them.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, not to hype Sparkbox up too much, but it is the only coding interview that I've ever had where I like learned things. So that was cool, that I would use even if I wasn't working here. But just to kind of give you all a high level view, I've done a lot of technical interviews just through various jobs. But some of the things that I've seen are a lot of pairing sessions, whether that's digitally or in person. And those could range from anything from doing like a data and algorithms type thing, like maybe create a class using object-oriented programming, or it could be solving, like getting a bunch of test cases and having to solve those and make all the tests pass. So there's a lot of various things you might see with those. I've also had some like legitimate whiteboarding experience where it's like you're actually in front of the whiteboard with marker. You're not just doing like pairing things. So those things have looked like either kind of creating, similar to the problem that we'll do later, creating or solving a data algorithm, or like kind of data or algorithmic questions. So like, again, just kind of creating a function that does something. Or one of the cooler ones that I've had, I've seen this twice, where I actually had to create like a component where, or a flow for a website where it's like, okay, create a website that does X, Y, Z. And you have to kind of create each component that you would use, how you would pass data between the pages and all of that, and kind of whiteboard it as you go along. So I don't know, I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of things out there that you might be seeing during these interviews. So
I would also add to that is you can expect to invest a lot of time, and that could be in the form of, you know, studying, for example, or just in the amount of time the interview is going to take. I interviewed at a place in California. They flew me out. I interviewed for 8 hours. The next day I came back, interviewed for, I don't know, 5 or 6 more hours. And in that process, I built several like little, you know, prototype apps, lots of whiteboarding. And so, I mean, basically, I really, really dislike whiteboard interviews. I failed on multiple occasions just by telling the person that they were wrong. So don't do that. And it wasn't that their ideas were wrong. It was just like the example that they wrote out. I was like, that doesn't work. But so I've done several of those. You know, I've had to give presentations. Before I accepted the position at Sparkbox, I had another opportunity at a company, and they wanted me to give a presentation based on why I thought they should build their application with Vue. So I did that. I gave a whole presentation. After the presentation, they told me they already decided on React. So that was kind of weird. But ultimately, I think that if a company gives you a take-home test or something like that, where you're kind of free to be your own developer and your own thought process, it's more of like allowing you to be what you would be in a work setting. If it's the kind of situation where it feels like I'm just trying to be tricked, I usually know off the rip that I don't want that position. And also, I would say apply to a bazillion positions. I have to so many places. I can remember like a handful of them, and I see people that get down, and you know, you're gonna forget, because you'll find a job you like and then you won't even care. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. No, that's everyone's experiences, I think, are really helpful to hear, because apprentices in different ways. I was going to move on to the next question, unless any of the apprentices have questions on that. What anyone said.
I have a somewhat related question. So I know that some companies are kind of like moving are more of the take home in combination with some other kind of assessment. But at least to like my knowledge, a lot of like the major like popular Big 10 companies are still kind of like on the spot, like whiteboarding. So my question is if any of you have any kind of like techniques or just things that you guys do to kind of like allow yourself to like focus as much as possible and not let it maybe like the anxiety or stress kind of like in the way.
I will say, and I don't know if this speaks so much to the anxiety piece, but the one thing that I would say is important, and Ricardo touched on this, right, is like talk out your thought process and your like what you're trying to accomplish, especially in those cases where it's like, hey, we're actually going to do it like on a whiteboard. We're just going to like kind of write out some pseudocode or kind of what that looks like explaining your thought process. I mean, you may not be able to say like, hey, like this is exactly what the solution is, but like, hey, here's what I'm trying to go for. Here's kind of what I want to accomplish, and I think this will do it. Like, I don't think anybody who is really doing these in a good way is going to say like you have to have it exactly precisely, correct. The goal generally should be, can this person think through the problem and come up with a reasonable answer? Like that's what most people are looking for, right? And you may be able to communicate things that you maybe don't have time to like write out or know exactly how to get the right code down. But you can communicate a lot through just speaking through your like what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ricardo.
One thing that in the same vein, after, so kind of almost like code comments, pseudo coding what I'm describing, there may be a section, it's okay to like, in my experience, it's been okay to say, so give an example. Okay, right here, there should probably be regex, and I can't think of the syntax. Do you guys know the syntax for this? In my experience, that has been perceived as a good communication thing, not a like, oh, he doesn't know regex down to the T. And that may be different. The higher levels, I do have, boss did interview at Google, and that probably may have been a different case there. But if you get a job at Google, way to go.
There are some websites out there I've seen referenced in other conversations about people doing whiteboarding that'll help you practice. So I can see if I can pass on some of those links, if I can find them. I'll have to look them up, but I know that they exist, I think, if you look them up. But like just in terms of preparation and getting rid of some of those nerves, it might help to practice a little bit.
Yeah, that would be great. I have not had to do many of these like whiteboarding interviews, which is also why I decided to make a panel, because I couldn't really speak to this session well. But something that I've learned through interviews is like you still get, technical questions in interviews, and I think somebody told me this at one point, like don't be afraid to be wrong, and show that you're wrong. Like it's okay to not know the answer, but you need to show that you're thinking through and you're like a problem solver. Like, some companies might want the exact right answer, but there's really not that many exact right answers in web development. So it's unlikely first that they want the exact right answer, but you might not know the answer, but as long as you can keep persevering and showing like, I'm going to attack this problem until we run out of time, or, I get it. I think it's valuable for them to see that you're not giving up, and you don't just say like, I don't know, I have no idea. Like just keep looking at the problem from different angles, talking through what you're thinking, like the different avenues that you're going down. Like maybe we should approach it from this way. Maybe if I use this language, it would work better. Maybe if we had it in this framework, like just keep talking, just keep working through. I think it's a really valuable skill set in a web developer to not give up and to have a lot of ideas.
From a non-technical standpoint, I think just to reiterate what Paul said, I do think it's really important, like when you're going through this, like apply to, you know, any jobs that pique your interest, just because again, you may have an interview with a company you don't really care about, but that's at least practice towards a company that you do care about. And on top of that, while you may be interviewing at a company you don't care all that much about, I think it is important to curate to an extent, like the companies that you are applying to. I know for me, a lot of the pressure comes from, or has come from in the past, where maybe I just applied to a lot of companies I didn't really like, but then one or two of the companies that I do really like, I get an interview at. And so then I put a ton of pressure on myself before and during the interview to be like, I got to get this one because this is the one I really want. But if you have a list of companies that for the most part, you would really be happy working at any of them, I think at least for me, it does help alleviate some of that pressure within the moment to be like, well, and to feel comfortable saying, I don't know, or I don't know how to do this, because if I don't get this one, I know I have a list of other jobs that I really like and that I would still be really interested in. And I can use this to like apply that to those interviews as well. So.
Gotcha.
And if you don't get your number one choice the first time around, you apply again in a year because then you might be a better fit for them at that point. So it's not like it's over and done because you've interviewed with a company once.
Yeah, I think Jody said something about that. Like, you know, you definitely want a job right when you come out of this, and sometimes you have to take something that maybe you're not as excited about. But if you know what you want to do, you work for a year and try to build up those skill sets so that you can, you know, do what you really want to do.
I would add too that along the lines of like when you're in an interview, you're certainly interviewing them. Regardless of like whether I've answered questions nicely or intelligently, whatever, I really try to get a feel for, if I can, especially if I'm working with them, like how knowledgeable they are. I mean, obviously I can't say like, oh, this person is smart, but I get a sense like this is someone I could definitely learn stuff from. And for me personally, that's where I really start to get interested in. So, and you can't always see that on the surface. So even if you don't feel like you necessarily are that interested in the position, always try to see it as a learning experience, you know. I mean, I said that weird.
No, that's great. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to move us on to a different question unless anyone has a last thought about this question. Okay. Oops. Why isn't it working? I will ask my question, I guess. Oh, is it still the keyboard thing? I don't understand. Okay, the question is, how did you prepare for the interview or whiteboarding? What kind of resources did you use? I'll try to get that on the slide.
So building off kind of what Katie said, like I did use some of those, like to be prepared, I have used some of those websites. So I've used like LeetCode, Code Wars, things like that. But one thing that really helped me, and I can send y'all the link, it does cost money, but there's a Udemy course called the Coding Interview Bootcamp. And I thought it was a really good resource just for like a base level to get a feel for, I'm not very good at like data and algorithms and things like that. I'm not great at those types of problems. So it was a really good resource for me to help get like a baseline knowledge and then go into Code Wars or go into LeetCode and feel comfortable solving a little bit more complex problems. But I can send that over.
One thing I did is it's easy to feel stale if you're spending all your time applying places and writing resumes, and it's easy to get burnt out. Applying to jobs can be a full-time job. Part of that in that time, what I did was use that time to create things that I would enjoy for two reasons: for sanity, and to be um, still using the tools that I will be using. If it takes 2 months to land a job and it's in React, and I haven't used React in 2 months, granted it's only 2 months, but that's still 2 months of stale knowledge. So one thing I did was just build little apps that I thought would be fun.
And I actually have had companies in the past do something like that too, where they'll look at your GitHub account and pull up something small that you've worked on and have you talk through it. And that's nice because you already know the code and it's pretty fresh. So those side projects can be really useful for things like that. Or they'll ask you to pick something out of your GitHub account and talk through it and give you the option.
Lots of companies are going to probably look through GitHub accounts, us being one of them. Another thing that I found a while back was there's a website called Interview Cake. And I think he has a paid plan, but you can also just sign up and he'll do I think weekly emails. It's here's a whiteboarding exercise to do. And then he'll walk through the solution. And that can be a good way to just kind of get an idea of different problems and different ways to solve different problems. I think it's good just for just learning, but it helps you to think through, okay, how can I work through this in that kind of scenario? And if you can get good at working through those things and practicing it, you're better off, likely to do better in those situations, like anything else. The more you practice that kind of thing, the better you're going to be at it.
I wonder too if we could just speak to regular interview prep as well. So maybe you've had a technical interview, or that's the next round, but it's more of a let's get to know you interview. We're not going to be doing code. Talking about preparing for an interview like that for a moment.
I think one of the biggest things there is one, just be yourself, right? That's who you don't want to present a false person. You want to show them who you are, right? You don't want to have to be fake the whole time you're working someplace. And I think to just kind of be honest about what you know and don't know. You don't want to portray something that you did, sometimes when people get asked, hey, what was your contribution to this? And they kind of inflate what level of contribution they might have had on a project. And then when asked about the details, they can't really answer it because they didn't actually do a thing on that. That looks way worse to somebody who's interviewing you than just saying here's what I did on this project, right? Being more upfront with what you did rather than trying to make yourself look like you did things you haven't. I'd much rather have somebody who didn't do a thing than somebody who pretended like they did a thing, right? So I think they just don't try to, don't sell yourself short, but don't oversell things either. It's a much better plan to be upfront and straight with kind of where you are, because that's who, they need to know who they're hiring. Because if you say you have experience in a thing and you don't, then the job probably isn't going to be very good.
Yep.
I know, Rob touched on this just now, but also, he said, don't sell yourself short, but also, feel free to, you don't want to be dishonest, but be very honest about your accomplishments. I know a lot of times, and especially this is a thing for women for whatever reason, we don't like talking about our accomplishments, and we don't like talking about, what we've done really, really well. We say, yeah, I'm kind of good at React. I'm okay. But, you've worked on it for 2 years. I've seen this, I've heard this from other people. So yeah, being honest, it's not just about being honest about what maybe you don't have experience in, but it's being very honest about what you do have experience in and some expertise. And one thing I know I've recommended here and there, just to kind of help give yourself a little bit more confidence, is to keep a brag file on yourself. When people put comments about you in the awesomeness channel, screenshot it and keep it for yourself. keep all of that stuff. When someone pays you a compliment, when you know, get written up, like you have a really great PR review and somebody's like, yeah, you really knocked that one out of the park. Like, keep that and read through it. And yeah, like that can help generate some confidence.
I want to say too, I love that, Katie. I went to a conference talk a while ago about like keeping, like if I am one of these people that I have trouble speaking, like if I need to speak for an interview and I'm not prepared, like I'm very bad at that. I need to prepare, I need to have like questions written down, like I can't think on the fly very well. And having like, I've even heard like having that list of like accomplishments, maybe you add to it like with things that you're proud of too. If you read that before an interview, it's like a really good, like, all right, like I'm ready, I can do this, like I deserve this. Like it's just, if you're that kind of person, it can be really helpful. And then again, it's nice to be able to be like, oh yeah, I remember this person said I was like amazing at PR reviews, so I might as well say that in this context right now. Like sometimes it helps to use the words of other people when you're at a loss for words for yourself. So I love that.
In terms of making a list, not so much, I guess, for like the personality type questions, but like a lot of interviews, you're going to get technical questions that aren't whiteboarding necessarily either. I like keep a list of any question that I don't know, and just try to figure out the answer afterwards. Whether I email the person or not kind of depends on, and say like, oh, hey, I found the answer to this question. Thanks for, you know, giving me, like, thanks for asking it for me. I actually learned something new. Whether I send an email like that, it just kind of depends on how the interview goes. But at the end of the day, at least you have the question for yourself, so that if you ever do get asked it again, you kind of know what you're talking about. So, yeah.
I think that's really powerful. I did that when I couldn't answer a question. I emailed them later and I was like, I got it. Here's the solution. And they liked it because like I felt like that was okay with the interview I did.
Yeah. And when I did some interviews I had, I like Mandy described, I could tell that it wasn't the type of company I wanted to work for, but some of the questions I didn't know the answer to. So I didn't follow up with an email because I didn't want to be at a place that wasn't going to be a good fit. But I wrote all those questions down just like you, Ben, because I was like, I want to know them and I want to better both myself as a developer and as a interviewee.
I want to say just two more things about preparing for interviews. I recommend coming to interviews with at least 3 to 5 questions, if not more. Those questions should be coming out of research you've done on the company. So you should know if they have stuff on their website about values, which a lot of companies do, know what those values are, and have a question about something related to that you're interested in, to show, like, your questions should show that you've done research and you care. And especially if you're interested in the company, it's really important to have questions that aren't just, what are the benefits here? Which is an important question, but like you need to go beyond that in an interview, because your questions can show that you are more than the average candidate who doesn't just ask about benefits. So I would recommend always coming with questions. And a question I learned to ask actually last year from someone who used to work at Sparkbox, I want to share with you all. She said that over the years of interviewing, she learned that this was a really great question to ask, especially at the end, when generally someone will say, okay, do you have any remaining questions? You can say, actually, yes, like, what hesitations do you have about me or my background that might not make me perfect for, or like might not make you consider me for this job, which is a really good time. I've never thought to ask that question, but if they're thinking about something the whole time and they don't say it, which is very likely, then that's their opportunity to say, well, I don't see any database experience on your resume. And you can be like, well, actually, I did that in a lab for research. I think Luis did something like this with databases. Like, he could, if they didn't see that on his resume, he would have time to defend himself, and they would be like, oh, I'm sorry that I didn't see that before, and now I know. And then that's no longer a concern. So I think that's really clever to ask a question like that.
I second that one. I asked that question, maybe different phrasing, every interview.
Apprentices, do you all have any questions? I think we'll maybe do a couple more and then we'll go on to whiteboarding.
I have a question. Rob, you mentioned that companies will look at your GitHub. What things are they looking for?
I've been known to just look through there and see if I can find, you know, are there projects that I can look at just to get an idea of where somebody might be, what kind of things they're interested in. You know, somebody's like brand new, might have a lot of, you know, things that kind of show that. Somebody's like who's got a little bit more experience, it's going to probably show in some of the work they do. It doesn't work across the board. Like, you know, a lot of people don't have a lot of things in their GitHub account, not because they're not doing things, but because they may just not do a lot of things outside of work, right? And maybe a lot of the stuff they do at work isn't available to have on their personal GitHub accounts. You know, like I think you all are doing stuff right now with like the financial dashboard, right? And getting it in a place that you can also kind of show that work, like personally. Like there was a long time where I worked for a company where everything I did was behind authentication, right? So I couldn't even show anybody what I did. The only thing I could show about what I did was the actual login page, right? Not very exciting. But I think it just gives another view into what they might be interested in, right? Like if I go to somebody's the GitHub account and there's lots of repos that are like React and Vue and Angular, it's like, oh, like they're really exploring lots of different kinds of frameworks. They're probably very well rounded, right? Or, you know, like it's just another way to get some insight into what a person is doing. I don't think I would use that as a hire or don't hire, just another bit of information.
Okay.
One thing to note in setting in GitHub, if you go to your personal settings to profile, there is include private contributions on my profile. That means they won't see the code, but if you were interviewing for Sparkbox and Rob was looking, he'd be able to see. I don't know if you've noticed below your overview, there's like X amount of contributions this year. If you have that selected, no, it still keeps the repos private, but you can see like the shaded in, oh, she did a lot of work this day. So I could see that she hasn't been like silent, not coding. I don't know if that's helpful or not from the interviewer, but I did that when I found that setting.
Another thing to note here is that none of you should feel like you have to code in your free time. So just to get a job, that is not necessary. So just to make that clear.
Next time, we'll delve into the scary and under-discussed area of salary negotiation. This session is one of my favorites and contains advice that will be applicable to any job, so please join us to learn tips and tricks to master the difficult skill of salary negotiation. And invite your friends.